Hey folks, welcome back to the channel. I've got another cheap guitar on the bench today. I have these sort of pawn shop guitars that I pick up every once in a while. Not really pawn shop, but you know what I mean. The kind of thing you'd find in there. This one is a 2009 Fender Squier Strat. Pretty good shape, but definitely needs some tweaks. And it's not worth putting a whole lot of time into, so I'm going to do a quick teardown video on this one today. Whenever I get a guitar on the bench, I do like to check a few specs before I tear it completely apart, so we'll do that first. Also, I've got a little bit of a teaser for an upcoming project that I've got going on the channel, so you'll look forward to that at the end of the video. First things first, let's check the neck relief. I've got other videos where I show this process, so I won't go into too much detail, but we're looking for a capo on the first fret the guitar around the 17th, and you'll want to shoot for around 10 to 12 thousandths of neck relief, usually 12 on a Strat, at the 8th fret. Well, this one doesn't quite seem to have that much, so when you don't have enough neck relief, you loosen the truss rod. Okay, well, a small tweak in the truss rod brings this thing back into spec, so I know the neck's okay. And I'll check out a few of the frets and see if there's any high ones. But to do that first, I'll need to adjust the action really quickly. Okay, well, it looks like they're going to be okay. I'll go ahead and do the rest of the strings. But on this one, and on most Strats, you kind of shoot for 4/64ths at the 17th fret. You can use some other specs at the 12th fret if you want. You can go by the chart that's on your little fret or your little action ruler, or some other spec you find on the internet. But you definitely need a couple of tools to do this job. One is the Allen wrench to adjust the saddle screws, and the other is that graduated ruler I talked about. So 4/64ths at the 17th on a Fender Strat, and everything should be good. This one has no buzzing on this low E string. I'll try the rest of them and see how that works out. Okay, well, I've got the action in spec now, and no string buzzing. Basically, you know, when you get the saddles set correctly, you should just check every fret from at least 12 on up just to make sure. And they all sound good, no buzzing. So that's what I'm looking for. If I was actually gonna keep this guitar assembled, well, first I would change the strings and get all the grime off the fretboard, but I would adjust the saddles so that the screws didn't protrude so much. There's some of these that are sticking up probably a quarter of an inch in the middle here, and that's just too much. Also, I would probably set the bridge up to float a little bit. That might actually make the screw problem a little worse. In this condition, I'm not messing with the guitar too much. I'm not going to bother setting intonation, even though it actually looks like it's probably actually set. And I'm just going to do a teardown. Now, this is an Affinity body. So one thing I'll mention about these bodies, even though this one's in pretty good shape, it probably won't bring much money. And the reason is because it's not a full thickness body. I think these bodies are only about 1.5 inches thick, and a standard Fender Strat's probably about 1 3/4 inches. So this one won't bring what a full thickness body will bring, but it'll still bring some money. And actually, believe it or not, there's fairly good money in these Indonesian necks, because the necks that have been made later, since this, like this is a 2009, so since this was made, Fender has switched to where they don't put an insert in the truss rod hole, and I don't know, it just feels like they're a little bit cheaper to me, especially in the finish department. So these Indonesian necks are actually pretty decent for an entry-level guitar. And like I said, all the frets fretted out pretty good on this one, and when you run your hand across the fretboard on the ends on these, they don't shred your fingers. So all things considered, this is a pretty good neck, and it'll make somebody a really great project. There is one other thing that I do like to do before I completely disassemble a guitar, and that's just to make sure the electronics work. You know, you could do that with the strings off, just tap the pickups with a screwdriver, but it does help to have the strings in place. You can check the tone controls that way. Just check, check every position, make sure that the strings work in every position. And then you'll want to check to make sure your tone controls work. On most Strats, the first tone control operates the neck pickup. The second tone control operates the middle pickup. And then you'll just want to make sure that nothing really happens on the bridge, unless it's wired that way. It could be. Okay, so this one's wired in typical Strat fashion. The other thing that I'm going to look at is just to make sure that the volume pot's not scratchy. And also that the pickup selector switch isn't scratchy. There's a little scratchiness inside that pickup selector. I don't know what kind of switch that is. I'm going to see if I can get some deoxit down there and clean it up. Okay, that's pretty good. Not too bad. It's definitely a plastic switch. I can see the internals, so I'm not too worried about it. Next thing I'll do is to take the strings off and probably then take the neck off. Well, the previous owner of this guitar did two things that I hate when they put the strings on. First, they tied knots in the end of the string to keep them from coming off the post. And second, they must not have had a string cutter or a pair of wire cutters, because they just wound and wound and wound and wound string around the end of this post. You don't want to do that. That's going to lead to tuning problems. You're never going to get the string stretched exactly right. Just 2 to 3 wraps is all you need. Another thing I like to check during disassembly is to see whether the body is a laminate body or an actual solid wood body. And this one does appear to be solid wood. Usually makes them a little bit more valuable. Well, I've removed the pick guard so we can get a better look at what's inside. This is a pretty standard setup for a mid-2000s or late or early 2010s Squier. It's got these split bar ceramic magnets for the single coils. These were used a lot on Mexican Stratocasters as well. And then there's a non-splittable, fairly standard humbucker here. I've done some of the measurements on these. These measure out at about 4K, and this measures out at about 10K ohms. That's pretty standard, nothing too hot there. There's mini pots here that are 250K, a pretty standard 0.22 cap, and a breadboard style. It's not plastic, at least on the outside. It's plastic on the inside, but it's got a metal cover switch, and then pretty standard thin wiring. I think the only thing notable is that the jack itself has a shielded wire going to it, and the cavities are not only shielded, but they're also grounded to the rest of the electronics. So it ought to be fairly noise free, and I think we saw that in our testing. But it's nice that you know that these things have shielded cavities. Well, thanks for sticking with me through the Squier teardown, and I mentioned that I've got a project that's coming up on the channel. This is a skateboard that I intend to turn into a guitar. So we'll see how that goes. I'm a big fan of like the 80s skateboard culture and, you know, all the early skateboard stuff. I found this skateboard, it's kind of a newer style, but my plan is to turn this into a guitar. And, you know, I don't know, I've never done it before. I could fall on my face, but we'll see how it goes. And, you know, if you think it might be interesting, please subscribe to the channel and follow along. Anyway, thanks a lot for viewing my videos. Thanks for liking them. Thanks for commenting. Thanks for subscribing, and I'll see you guys next time.